Why did I bring this? Hey! You are idiot. Wow, that's really clever. Thanks. In today's video, we will be going back in time and giving out awards to the 1876 MLB season. They didn't have awards back then. We have awards now, so it only seems fitting to me to hand out some overdue hardware. And trust me, some of these guys had insane stats. In this series, we will be going over every MLB season and re-awarding, or in some cases, awarding every season of the National and American leagues. Now, I know there were plenty of other organizations playing ball at that point, but for order's sake, we're just going to do the National League founded in 1876 and the American League founded in 1901. We will be doing every modern award out there except for the Roberto Clemente Award, and in the order that they are released, which is shown here. But yeah, let's just jump into this with awarding the inaugural season of the National League, 1876. Now, just a brief overview of the National League in 1876. It featured 8 teams playing anywhere from 57 to 70 games. Those teams were the Chicago White Stockings, which are the modern-day Cubs, the Hartford Dark Blues, or a creative name there, the Boston Reds, which are the modern-day Braves, the Louisville Grays, New York Mutuals, Philadelphia Athletics, not the modern-day Athletics, and the Cincinnati Reds, also not the modern Reds. The White Stockings won the pennant in 1876 with a record of 52-14, scoring 9.5 runs per game, with only 3.89 runs allowed per game. Here's the rest of the standings. I mean, the Reds were pretty awful. The Dark Blues and the Brown Stockings were challenging the White Stockings for the NL pennant, which was awarded via total wins, as there were no playoffs back then. The batting champion of 1876 was Ross Barnes of the White Stockings with a 429 average. Now, the league average was 265, which means that Barnes had a batting average differential of .164. The ERA champion was George Bradley of the Brown Stockings. He had an ERA of 1.23, with the league average ERA being 2.31, so that leaves him with an ERA differential of 1.08. All right, now that we have a general idea of how the 1876 season went, let's get to the awards. And first up on the list is the Gold Gloves. Now, we don't nearly have the advanced fielding metrics that we have nowadays, so this system will be pretty rudimentary. Starting us off at the position designated 1, we have the Louisville Grays ace Jim Devlin winning the Gold Glove with a mammoth 0 defensive WAR, but he had 153 chances with only 9 errors, leaving him with a fielding percentage of 94.1. He also turned 4 double plays, so good job, Jim. At the catcher position, our winner is John Clapp of the St. Louis Brown Stockings, who had 1 defensive WAR, which is actually pretty good considering he only played in 64 games. He led all catchers in innings, chances, putouts, and double plays, also being second in assists. At first base, our winner is Joe Gerhardt of the Louisville Grays with 1.2 defensive WAR. Now, it was very close between him and Herman Delman, but I gave the nod to Gerhardt because of his lead in assists, defensive WAR, and fielding runs. At second base, our Gold Glove winner is Ed Somerville, who led the entire league in defensive WAR with 1.6. He leads all second basemen in chances, assists, and range factor per game, being second in putouts and double plays turned. And at third base, our winner is the familiar Cap Anson of the Chicago White Stockings, who had .9 defensive WAR, leading all third basemen in putouts, chances, assists, and double plays. And at the premier fielding position in baseball, shortstop, our winner is George Wright of the Boston Reds. He wins a very close decision over Davey Force and Tom Carey. Now, George led all 3 of those guys in assists and double plays turned, being second in WAR per game, range factor, and fielding percentage. Overall, it's a razor close decision, but Wright gets the nod due to his double plays and assists, which are 2 very important stats for shortstops, as well as a very good range factor, defensive WAR, and fielding percentage. Now, starting us off in the outfield, our left field winner is Tom York of the Hartford Dark Blues with a stellar .1 defensive WAR, which, I mean, to be honest, pretty much every one of the outfielders had negative defensive WAR, including one of our winners, so I guess they really improved their defense over time. But yeah, York had an .899 fielding percentage and 8 outfield assists. Our center field winner is Jack Remsen, also of the Dark Blues. He has .8 defensive WAR, 12 assists, as well as leading all outfielders in putouts. And finishing off the Dark Blue Gold Glove trio in the outfield is Dick Higham, who had a negative .2 defensive WAR. But he led all outfielders in assists, which I'd argue is one of the most important stats for outfielders. So on screen now is our lineup of our Gold Glove winners. All right, our Gold Gloves are wrapped up. Now let's move on to what the MLB announces next, our Silver Sluggers. Our best hitting pitcher was Al Spalding of the Chicago White Stockings. He had 1 offensive WAR in 1876, which is higher than a lot of the position players. A 123 OPS plus, batting .312 with 16 extra base hits. He also only struck out 3 times in 298 plate appearances. Now, he did play some games in the field, but he started 61 games for him, which is like 95% of the game, so he is 100% a pitcher. Our catching Silver Slugger goes to Hall of Famer Deacon White of the White Stockings. He led the entire league in RBIs with 60. He also had 2.6 offensive WAR and a 148 OPS plus. And he bats 78 points higher than the league average batting average. That's a A lot of averages. All right, and for the third time in a row, a Chicago White Stocking has won a Silver Slugger with our first base best bat going to Cal McVeigh. 2.1 offensive WAR, 142 OPS plus while batting 82 points higher than the league average. At second base, I mean, it's not even close. Ross Barnes of the White Stockings easily takes it home with 5.1 offensive WAR. He led the league, not just second baseman, the league in WAR, runs, hits, singles, doubles, triples, walks, average, on base, slugging, OPS, OPS plus, advanced on base average, and total bases. He was also only 1 RBI off from the league lead there. Very, very clearly the best offensive second baseman, and spoiler alert, this will not be the last award he wins. Our third baseman Silver Slugger is Cap Anson of the, you guessed it, Chicago White Stockings. This one was actually pretty close between Anson, the Athletics' Levi Merrill, and the Brown Stockings' Joe Batten. But Anson beats Merrill by 0.7 offensive WAR and 3 points in OPS plus. And he beats Batten by 0.8 offensive WAR and 30 points in OPS plus. Our winner at the shortstop position is John Peters of the Louisville Great. No, I'm just kidding. It was another White Stocking. Once again, it was close between Peters and George Wright of the Boston Reds, but Peters has him beat in numerous categories like offensive WAR, OPS plus, hits, average, so he takes home the hardware. In left field, we have George Hall of the Philadelphia Athletics. Praise the Lord, it's not a White Stocking. In fact, spoiler alert, none of the outfielders are. He led all outfielders, not just left fielders, all of the outfield in offensive WAR, OPS plus, on base, slugging, OPS average, advanced on base average, and total bases. He also won the home run crown with a crazy 5 home runs. He was one of just 2 guys to eclipse the 200 OPS plus mark alongside Ross Barnes. The best offensive left fielder in 1876 was Lip Pike of the St. Louis Brown Stockings. So you know how Hall was, first in everything? Yeah, Lip Pike is second in everything. Most importantly, he was second in OPS plus and offensive WAR while batting 58 points higher than the league average. And finishing us off in the Silver Slugger department, we have the right field winner, who just so happens to be our Gold Glove winner as well, Dick Higham of the Dark Blues. Now, right field was definitely the weakest of the 3 outfield positions, but Higham still managed some good stats. 1.8 offensive WAR, 136 OPS plus, and leading the league in doubles. I guess technically he's the first player to ever win a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger in the same season, at least according to my standards, so congratulations. On screen now are our Silver Slugger winners listed by position. Alright, now that we've completed the every position gets an award section, let's move on to the only the best in the league gets the award there's gotta be a better name for that. Anyway, let's kick off that section with what the MLB announces next, the Platinum Glove. Now this award goes out to the best defender in the league, but we only have 1 league, so this can pretty much be considered the defensive MVP. From this award and every one from here on out, we will have 3 finalists and 1 winner. This is how the MLB does it, except for the Platinum Glove and the Hank Aaron Award, but I'm going to be doing it to show some more recognition to some guys who deserve it. And those 3 finalists for the Platinum Glove are Ed Somerville, second baseman for the Louisville Grays, Joe Gerhardt, first baseman for the Louisville Grays, and George Wright, shortstop for the Boston Reds. And the winner is, by 1 vote, mine, Ed Somerville, second baseman for the Louisville Grays. Now, I wouldn't say this was a particularly close race, but it definitely wasn't obvious. Somerville leads the league in defensive WAR, range factor per 9 innings and games outside of first baseman, because that stat is heavily favored towards first baseman because of the large amount of putouts that they get. He is also second in the entire league in assists behind fellow finalist George Wright. Now, his fielding percentage isn't the best, but he led the league in chances outside of first baseman, so it makes a little sense and is a little bit more excusable. Plus, fielding percentage is a tad overrated. But yeah, there you have your 1876 Platinum Glove winner, Ed Somerville. Now moving on to the Baseball Writers Association of America Awards, or BBWAA Awards, or as I like to call them, the PBRA Awards, or the Professor Baseball Research Association Awards. I'm only just partially kidding with that one. But yeah, let's get on to our first major award, Rookie of the Year. Now you may be thinking to yourself, wait, if this is the first year of the National League, isn't everyone a rookie? And you would be correct. Essentially, this is the MVP. But this is the only year outside of, I guess, 1901 in the American League where this will be the case. So without further ado, let's get to our 3 finalists for Rookie of the Year. We have Jim Devlin, pitcher for the Louisville Grays, Ross Barnes, second baseman for the Chicago White Stockings, and George Bradley, pitcher for the St. Louis Brown Stockings. And your 1876 PBRA Rookie of the Year is Ross Barnes, second baseman of the Chicago White Stockings. Now, it's kind of hard to not go with the guy who led the league in darn near every category. Outstanding Rookies is who Wikipedia says this award should go to, and Barnes definitely stood out more than anybody else. Oh, it's hard to not give the award to the guy with 17.7 WAR in Jim Devlin, but I will go further into depth with that in later awards. But in short, I believe Ross Barnes stood out more. Now moving on to the most boring but still very important award, Manager of the Year. Now this award doesn't always have to go to just the best team, but especially in the first year where we have no track record from before, it will most likely go to the best team. The 3 finalists for Manager of the Year are Bob Ferguson, Player Manager for the Hartford Dark Blues, Mace Graffin, Manager of the St. Louis Brown Stockings, and Al Spalding, Player Manager for the Chicago White Stockings. And the Manager of the Year in 1876, Al Spalding, Player Manager for the Chicago White Stockings. I mean, I feel like the explanation is pretty simple here. He managed the best team with the most wins, and he managed the best offense. His squad led the league in wins, win percentage, runs per game, run differential, and expected win-loss. Oh, and he also pitched, 89% of their innings, got 47 wins for them, got 9.4 WAR as well. So a very deserving Manager of the Year. Next up is the Cy Young Award, the best pitcher in the league, and this one may not go to who you think it should. Our 3 finalists for the PBRA Cy Young Award are George Bradley, pitcher for the St. Louis Brown Stockings, Tommy Bond, pitcher for the Hartford Dark Blues, and Jim Devlin, pitcher for the Louisville Grays. And after long consideration, your winner for the 1876 PBRA Cy Young, George Bradley of the St. Louis Brown Stockings. Now this one was insanely close, far and away the award I debated over the most. I know, how can you not give it to the guy with 17.7 WAR? Well, let me tell you why. Honestly, I'm really not sure how Devlin got that much WAR. It's probably a mixture of the small sample of pitchers that each team really only had like 1 to 3 pitchers, so replacement level's whack, as well as him being, the only pitcher for his team and getting the entirety of the volume there. My guess is the culprit is the small sample size and bad replacement level. But George Bradley had the better season in my opinion. He has Devlin beaten in ERA, ERA plus, and WHIP. He also led the league in shutouts and hits allowed per 9 innings. Bradley was better than Devlin at limiting runs and base runners, which is the entire point of pitching. Now Devlin leads in WAR, FIP, and strikeouts, which are important. Devlin didn't even get above a 500 record, and I know he did have the 3rd worst offense, so it's a little bit fair. And I know that wins are overrated, but back in the day when pitchers pitched the entire game, it was less so, it meant more, and Bradley had the better win-loss record. I mean, it's a hard call. I really can't say there's no argument for Devlin, because there definitely is. And as much as I love WAR and think it is the most important stat, I just don't know how much I can value it in this context. Which is why I'm thankful we have other stats so that I can make the call. So the PBRA Cy Young Award does go to George Bradley for the 1876 NL season. All right, main event time. Let's take a look at our 3 finalists for NL MVP. We have Ross Barnes, second baseman for the Chicago White Stockings, Jim Devlin, pitcher for the Louisville Grays, and George Bradley, pitcher for the St. Louis Brown Stockings. And the winner of the 1876 PBRA NL MVP is Ross Barnes, second baseman of the Chicago White Stockings. What a shocker, the hitter won. But it really does come down to the name of the award, Most Valuable Player. Let me show you something. Ross Barnes scored 126 runs in 66 games, which in and of itself is just insane. But if we take a look at his share of the league's runs, it gets even crazier. The entire league scored 3,066 runs in 1876, and if we divide his runs by the league's, we get his share, which is 4.1% of the league's runs. So if we take a look at the 2025 NL runs scored and input Barnes' share, we would get a player that scored 447 runs in a single season. All that to say, if you took Barnes off of his team, they would lose over 1/5 of their runs, or 20.2%. Now that is value. Oh, not to mention him leading the league in every offensive category. Now don't get me twisted, pitchers are very valuable, even more so back in the day when every team only really had 1 ace. But Barnes did something special in 1876, which is why he gets awarded the NL MVP. Alright, that does it for our big awards, but we still got one left, the Hank Aaron Award. So let's take a look at our finalists. We have George Hall, left fielder for the Philadelphia Athletics, Lip Pike, center fielder for the St. Louis Brown Stockings, and Ross Barnes, second baseman for the Chicago White Stockings. And the winner is, I don't need this paper, say it with me, Ross Barnes, second baseman for the Chicago White Stockings. Pretty obvious here, no one else was really in contention. No offense to the other 2 finalists. And shout out to them, George Hall had a 204 OPS plus and 3.1 offensive WAR. But I mean, Barnes in 1876 was just leaps and bounds better than everybody else. Last thing, let's quickly go over the All-MLB team for the 1876 season. Or I guess the All-NL team, but whatever. Our 5 pitchers are George Bradley, the ace for the Brown Stockings, Jim Devlin for the Louisville Grays, Tommy Bond for the Dark Blues, Al Spalding, the ace for the White Stockings, and Candy Cummings, the rare seen in this era, the second pitcher for the Dark Blues. Our catcher is Deacon White of the White Stockings. Our first baseman, we got Cal McVeigh of the White Stockings. Second base, obvious, is Ross Barnes of the White Stockings. Third base is Cap Anson from the Chicago White Stockings. Shortstop is John Peters of the White Stockings. Left field is George Hall of the Athletics, center field is Lip Pike of the Brown Stockings, and in right field we got Dick Higham of the Dark Blues. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the 1876 MLB Awards. On screen now are the graphics of all the winners that will be kept track of throughout the entire series. If you found this informative or entertaining, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, it would mean the absolute world to me. And as always, thank you guys so much for coming to class. I've been Professor Baseball, you've been great, and I will see you next time.